"What did you do to me?" Quinn said, his anger evident in his voice that became a bit deeper. The others had never seen Quinn like this before, so they were stunned. Meanwhile, filled with rage, Quinn started to walk toward Sia. Right now, Quinn was unsure what Sia's skill was. All he knew was it had reduced his stats by 10%. If this was a permanent effect, then he would have lost a lot of hard work. "Is this guy really a level 1? Sia thought, as she looked into the anger that was swimming in Quinn's eyes. She wasn't sure if she imagined it or not, but she thought she could see the color of his eyes slowly starting to turn red. "Hey, Quinn, relax," Fex said as he jumped in between the two of them before Quinn could even act. He then leaned forward and whispered to Quinn, making sure his body and head were blocking Sia from seeing him. "Quinn, your eyes, they're red. You need to control your anger and calm down," Fex advised. However, as Quinn thought about how hard he had worked to gather those stat points, and them going away just like that, his anger started to boil again. "Spirit spear has worn off. Stats have returned to normal." The spear that impaled his chest slowly dissipated into thin air, and the energy seemed to return to his body. At the same time, his mind was suddenly cleared along with his anger. "Hey, did you really think I would hurt you in front of all these teachers and students? It looks like I've joined a team of crazy people," Sia complained. "A support ability?" Vorden said. Sia simply nodded as a response to Vorden's query. The reason Vorden hadn't reacted the same way as the others was because he had seen this type of ability before. "I'm guessing that it's the spirit drain ability, am I correct?" Vorden inquired further. "It allows the user to form spirit weapons in their mind. When this spirit hits its target, it can either act as a buff or debuff. There are different types of spirit abilities. If this is spirit drain, then this acts as a debuff on the user. I don't know the finer details about it, though." "Thank you," Sia said. "I knew someone on this team would have a brain. As he said, when my ability hits, it is able to debuff the target for 5 seconds, and then the effect wears off. The good thing about this is that the spears can also stack up. In that time frame, the more spears impaled into a target's body, the heavier the debuff. Because I'm only a level 3, though, the amount of time the spear lasts is only 3 seconds, and the distance I can throw the spear is quite short." The others didn't want to admit it, but having Sia on the team would be a great addition. Support-type abilities were greatly sought after. The problem was that they were also very unpopular. Usually, support abilities required one to work with the team. Without them, they were pretty much useless. Sia's spears didn't inflict much damage to its target. It would only drain their energy and stats, meaning that while she was using her spears, it would be best if someone else dealt with the target. For this reason, many people tend to overlook this ability whenever they're about to pick, since it was hard to be defenseless on a battlefield. Although there were the plus sides, if one was to select a support ability, it meant that they would easily be able to join a faction in the future. "Anyway, it looks like this group won't amount to much," Sia uttered. "So why don't we just meet up on the day of the portal outing? There's no point training together within the 2 days left prior to the expedition." "But," ahead of arguing her case, Quinn interrupted Layla's speech. "I agree. Why don't we all do our own thing before the portal outing? It's been a tiring week, and I think some of us can do with some rest," Quinn said. Before the others could even say anything, Sia was already walking off. The assembly had ended, and students were told that, until the portal outing, they would have the next 2 days off. This was to make up for the weekend that they would, most often than not, utilize to rest. The idea was also to allow the students to focus on teamwork. It was a free period. Still, the teachers encouraged the students to ask them for help and guidance. Nevertheless, Quinn had his own ideas and plans ahead of the expedition. While everyone was busy doing their own business, Quinn had arrived at the VR gaming room. With the nanostick that had been given to him, he no longer needed to bug Logan. Accordingly, he headed to his room in order to use the private servers. "Now, let's see what you got. Tutorial video for skill Phantom Hit has begun." The VR room was the best place to practice, and now that he had access to Logan's private server, it meant Quinn could also practice his shadow abilities freely. If there was no way for him to get blood at the moment, then that meant he would have to focus on learning more skills. The first thing Quinn was going to do was have a look at the new tutorial video he had unlocked after learning the vampire martial arts. Phantom Punch Tutorial was the name of the video. It made sense that the new skill was somehow related to a punch, since vampire martial art mainly focused on using hands. "Hello there," the blond man in a cheery voice said in the video. Once again, the blond man was in a martial arts hall with wooden floors and such. Quinn started wondering about the location of the place. Was it on Earth, like the system AI said, or maybe another place? The identity of the blond man remained a mystery, too. If only Quinn could trust Fex enough, he would try to find a way to show what the blond man looked like to Fex. Maybe he would have an answer. "It seems like you are progressing quite well. Unfortunately, my talents never seem to fit in well with the vampire martial arts, and I thought you two might stray from this path. But just in case, I decided to include this video if the user ever decided to learn it. In my opinion, this is one of the most useful skills to have. But just a little warning, this skill seems to work better with beings with a high level of intelligence, namely humanoid creatures. When testing this against a beast, it has little to no effect." This piece of information disappointed Quinn a little. He was just about to go on an orange portal outing where plenty of beasts reside. Still, the skill would be useful. Dalki, vampires, and humans all fell into the humanoid category, and lately, it seemed like Quinn was going to be attacked by them a lot more than beasts these days. "To perform this skill based on the system stats, you will need at least 15 points of agility and 10 points of charm. These are the minimum requirements. Now, as you increase your points into charm and agility, this skill will work even better. This is a skill that evolves with your stats, not by continuous usage." This sounded a little confusing at first, but Quinn seemed to understand. After using the blood swipe multiple times, it had eventually evolved. This was the same with blood spray and also the shadow skills. It seemed like whatever skills were related to the charm stat would evolve or become more powerful as the stat related was increased, such as his daze and influence skills. "This skill will be a tricky one to show, so you will have to listen to my explanation very carefully," the blond man said. The man then brought out a human mannequin that was made of foam. He blasted out, throwing his fist, just touching the mannequin ever so slightly. The set of moves and punches he had used was the same that he and Fex had learned. "Now, I'm going to chat a little bit just for the video and show you how the skill will look." The blond man took a deep breath and then suddenly threw out a bolt of punch lightning fast towards the head. It was a perfect hit. Bang! The sound of the impact was heard, but looking at the video, there was no such mark on the mannequin's head. Upon taking a closer look, instead of a marking on the head, there was a fist mark on the body instead. "But I was sure I saw him aim for the head. When did he hit the body?" Quinn thought. As I said before, this is just a demonstration of what the skill looks like, and not me using the skill. This is a phantom punch. While in a fight, you will aim your punch in a certain direction to start. Before the first movement is made, your charm skill will take slight control of the user's mind. To them, an image will appear and make it look like the punch has continued heading in the initial direction. But in fact, this will be a phantom punch. While the user is dodging or trying to block it, the real blow will come from somewhere else. This skill works even better if you have high enough agility. You will be able to perform several phantom punches at once, confusing your opponent. But be careful. Just like with daze, it has a chance of not working well. This is why I recommend you to increase your charm points when possible. What I just did was not the real phantom punch. Instead, I decided to just change the direction of my punch at such a speed that the video was unable to capture it. I'm pretty amazing, right? After hearing this line, it reminded Quinn a little bit of Fex. He started wondering whether all vampires were really like this, arrogant and big-headed. The phantom punch can only be used against real opponents, so there is no way for me to show you through the video. After the initial video explanation was over, as usual, there were a few more videos that broke down the action slowly, bit by bit. Quinn began to watch the videos. The first video explained the feeling while using the charm ability on your opponent. He explained it by saying it should feel similar to when Quinn would use the daze skill. He should gather that feeling again and try to focus it through his eyes. Then, using his strong will and the image in his head, he would be able to project a fist outward. This in turn would allow the opponent to see the same thing. The next set of videos explained the hard part. It was the combination of the two. After hearing the explanation, Quinn didn't think it would be too hard, but just practicing it, not using it against an opponent, he found out it was extremely difficult. It was similar to someone learning the piano. One part of the brain needed to focus and do a certain action, while the other part needed to do a different action. The problem was that it was the same arm that was meant to be doing the action. If he projected thoughts to target the head and tried punching below, as soon as he thought too much about hitting the head, his fist would automatically hit upward. Still, Quinn wasn't the type to give up. If there was one thing he was good at, it was that he was able to repeat an action repeatedly. He never got bored of doing the same thing over. As he repeated the move several times, he could slowly separate his thoughts and actions into two separate things. He had now lost count of how many punches he had performed. The good thing, though, was he didn't feel tired at all because of the game. However, it did have a huge impact on his mind. He didn't know whether it was because he was in the game or trying to split his thought into two, but he would often get headaches as he pictured himself using the charm ability while forcing the energy outward from his eyes. Surprisingly, in the middle of his practice, a notification screen popped up. It wasn't something he was expecting. "Your dedication has paid off. You have pushed your charm skill to the limit several times. Charm stat +1. Charm 13. It was the first time a stat point had increased without him leveling up or consuming blood. The system was clear that it was a fact that Quinn had continuously pushed himself while trying to learn the skill. However, this was a bigger deal than he thought. Maybe there was another way to increase his stats. If the others worked in the same way, if Quinn went out and constantly ran until he tired himself out, would his stamina increase? And was this the same for other stats? What if he continuously lifted weights? Would his strength increase as well? The only problem with this method would be time. It was a lot easier to take a blood sample from someone and increase his strength. In a situation like this, where he couldn't do that, maybe it was a good idea to look into it. Quinn had done enough practice for now, and he felt like he had done as much as he could. And yet, he still didn't have the skill in his system, like the flash step and hammer strike. Certain combination skills didn't appear in the system, like blood hammer and using blood swipe with his shadow. But since this skill was taught by the system, maybe it would have displayed. Right now, there was only one thing he could do. Just as the system had said, if he wanted to practice and learn how to use it, he would need to use it on a real opponent. Switching servers. Blood Evolver is online. Matchmaking in progress. Opponent found. Let's do this. There were quite a lot of people in the world that had an interest in technology. If one could not make it in the world using their abilities, the only real avenue and sector that had a lot of potential that anyone with enough effort and determination could tap into was the realm of research and technology. There were myriads of abilities that could help you work better in this field, but nothing could compare to the greatness of the human mind when it came to creative thinking and engineering, which led to the creation of these fields. Unfortunately for Nate, he was not one of these people, but I knew quite a lot of people who had knowledge in this field. Nate had gotten one of these said people to set up a system in which he would get notified when the Blood Evolver was online. Recently, he had also added the new user Zombie P to that list as well. He was unable to see the person's game last time, but now he didn't want to miss out on them. While Nate was relaxing with his best friend Sam, as usual, he received a notification. Nate immediately headed off towards the capsule. Right now, both he and Sam were watching their favorite contender. "Hey, I think you're obsessed with this guy," Sam said in a concerning voice. "It's just that this person's growth never seems to slow down. I've grown myself over time, but I'm just wondering where his limits are," Nate explained. Quinn had been matched up with another level 4 user, but unlike the ones he fought against previously. This user was also wearing beast gear around his chest. Since the first expedition had already happened with each of the military bases, it was expected that players of the game would now more likely have at least some level of beast gear. The match had begun, and Quinn followed his usual routine of rushing forward and fighting head-on. Oftentimes he would be the aggressor in fights, causing the enemy to slightly panic in the middle of the battle, and this time was no different. Seeing a target running towards him, the user paced both his hands together and shot out a hydro pump of water. The stream of water was strong and fast, but still, due to the distance, Quinn could easily avoid it, but instead of outright avoiding the attack, he waited till the last second and performed the flash step to avoid the attack. The water user, seeing this, changed his attack slightly. Instead of a large stream of powerful water, he decided to shoot out smaller, fast streams of water that came out like bullets. Once again, though, Quinn used the flash step to avoid the next set of shots. Quinn only had enough stamina to perform 3 flash steps in one game, so he had already used up over half his strength, and his body was tied. Still, he continued moving, and then before the user could use his water bullets again, Quinn performed his 3rd flash step, appearing behind the user. As he turned his head around, Quinn made sure to look him in the eyes, just as the video tutorial had said. He activated his charm the same way when he used the daze skill. Now all he needed to do was project the thought strongly, using his mind of aiming to punch the head, while the real punch would come from below. Everything was going perfect so far, and he could imagine hitting the person in the head. Then his fist made contact, but instead of receiving feedback from hitting the body, the punch had been blocked with the other user's hand, which was guarding his face. "No, I thought I did it perfectly. Why did my attack go for the head?" Quinn thought. Quinn previously thought he had perfected the phantom punch, but using it with no opponent and using it against a real opponent were 2 different things. With the pressure to perform perfectly, and with the enemy standing in front of him, his concentration lagged at some point, so his attack failed. With one of his other hands, the water user blasted a stream, hitting Quinn right in the stomach, sending him onto the floor. Due to his usage of flash step multiple times in a fight, he was tired, and his movements were a little sluggish. It also seemed like the beast equipment had given his opponent some extra strength. A blow from Quinn was more powerful than from a normal person, yet he was able to block it perfectly. Quinn quickly got up from the ground and attacked again, but unfortunately the result was same. Quinn ended up on the ground once again. "What is he doing?" Nate said. "Why isn't he using his red aura skills, or the hammer strike? Why did he waste all his energy using that fancy footwork at the beginning? Even then, why a punch to the head without using any feints or tricks to confuse the enemy?" Nate was thoroughly confused as to why the person he had watched improving each time he played a match and fought against someone had seemingly made no progress at all in this fight. He seemed to be suffering a setback. Eventually, the match had ended, and Quinn unsurprisingly lost. Nate was speechless. He thought he was the only person who had beaten the Blood Evolver before, and the one he knew now was a lot stronger than before. Nate wanted him to remain undefeated until their rematch. If the Blood Evolver had lost in a grand duel or something, he wouldn't be so upset, but he had lost against a simple level 4 water user. During the match, Quinn felt something near to the end of the battle he had felt earlier while practicing. "Matchmaking is in progress." Once again, Quinn went into the next match. Nate stayed and watched carefully, but it seemed to be nearly an exact copy of the last game. After watching 4 matches, the Blood Evolver had lost 4 times in a row. Nate wasn't the only one who had been watching Quinn's matches. There were a few others who had become fans as well, and they were nearly just as disappointed as him with the results they were seeing right now. "Does this mean that he was just a hacker?" a spectator said. "I guess so. They probably patched the game so he can't use his red aura skills anymore. Without them, it's clear that he's just average when it comes to hand-to-hand combat," another one commented. This was the logical conclusion the others had come to. No one would usually lose a match without giving it everything they got, and in the last 4 games, Quinn didn't use a single skill other than the flash step and the failed phantom punch. "Come on, Nate, let's go. We need to practice, man. We're just wasting time here," Sam said. "You go ahead. I'll catch up and head offline when he goes offline." Sam could see the disappointment on Nate's face. It was as if he had just watched his favorite superhero lose to a villain in a fight. The only thing he could do now was give him some space. After losing 5 matches in a row, the only person that kept on watching Blood Evolver's matches was Nate. He didn't know why, but he felt that there had to be a reason for all the strange actions that Blood Evolver did in the past matches. The reason for his thinking was the fact that Quinn had lost every game doing the same thing. Only an idiot would do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Even if he was now unable to use the red aura anymore, it didn't make any sense. As the next match started, Quinn now looked more confident than he did before. He knew he was incredibly close. His opponent was a female. The ability for now was unknown, as the inspection skill didn't work in-game. Quinn rushed forward as usual, but this time, no attacks were aimed at him. When this happened, it usually meant the person he was going up against had a transformation or hardening ability, the perfect opponent for the Phantom Strike. Quinn lifted his fist and aimed for the woman's head. As she saw the punch, a large spike appeared on her face. If Quinn was to carry on moving forward, then the spike would go right through his hand. She could see the punch rushing forward and about to go through the spike. A smile appeared on her face, but suddenly she felt pain in her stomach as she keeled over. Phantom Punch skill successfully learned. The fist hadn't hit her head, but struck her stomach instead. This time, Quinn went for a blow to the stomach. A spike was formed where the punch would make contact, but then sharp pain assaulted the woman on the side of her head. Quinn continued using the Phantom Punch in this fashion, successfully landing hit after hit, while on the outside, Nate, who was watching the entire thing, was deeply confused. All he could see was Quinn's opponent forming spikes and blocking the attacks in the wrong places. It was clear where the punches were coming from, so why was she constantly blocking in the wrong place? The match had finally ended, and Quinn had been declared the winner, but Nate was even more confused now. However, after watching the Blood Evolver's next 3 games, and each one of them coming out in a victory in the same fashion, goosebumps started to appear all over his body. The hairs on his forearms were now standing up. He still didn't understand what was going on, but it was painfully obvious that all of these were done on purpose. Who is this monster? Once the system had confirmed Quinn that he had learned Phantom Punch, everything got a lot easier from then onwards. Instead of concentrating on the feeling like he did before, now all he had to do was think about the skill, and his mind would automatically do the work for him. It was one of the other perks of having the system. No longer would he fail sometimes while trying to create the punch. It would now work 100% of the time. This was the same as when he learned the Crescent Blood Kick as well. This didn't mean it would work successfully on his opponent 100% of the time, though. It was just that he was now able to perform the skill successfully every time. In the next matches Quinn played, while using the skill he had learned quite a bit about how the skill worked. Just like the system had said, there were some opponents the skill was less effective against. Quinn couldn't figure out why, as it didn't seem to be linked with the user's ability level. Most likely it was more to do with their mental ability. For some of the opponents he faced, it seemed like they were only partly tricked. On their end, they would see the Phantom Punch, but it would disappear before it made a contact. While for those with weaker minds, it felt like they could feel the Phantom Punch hitting them. Still, even a slight phantom image gave Quinn a huge advantage. The constant use of the punches on top of his speed made his opponents feel like they were fighting against someone with extra hands. Now he understood why the blonde man had said the skill would improve as he improved both his agility stat along with his charm stat. 180 of 400 EXP. After defeating the 5 opponents, Quinn had obtained 10 experience points from each of them. It wasn't his goal, but a bonus along the way of learning the new skill. He also got 10 points for completing his daily quests, drinking 2 liters of water daily along with avoiding the sun for 8 hours. But still, out of everything so far, the quickest way to level up was defeating beasts. Quinn would need to use this to his advantage when fighting on the other planet. There was also a chance for him to level up even quicker, since the system had stated that by fighting along with Peter, he would gain the experience of Peter's skills as well. With hours of practice and the many matches Quinn had played, he didn't realize the time, and the VR pod machines shut off. They usually turned off an hour before curfew time, and his disconnection from the game was a clear sign. While on his way back to his room, Quinn wondered, "Only 1 day to go for the portal outing. What is the next best step to get stronger?" In his mind, Quinn split up his skills into 4 different categories. He had his blood abilities, such as Blood Swipe, Blood Spray, Blood Bank, and so on. These skills could be upgraded by using them multiple times. He then had his charm skills, Daze, Influence, and now Phantom Punch. The next section he counted was his fighting skills, such as Flash Step, Hammer Strike, as well as Blood Hammer and Phantom Punch. although the last two skills were a combination of the other sections. Finally, his ability skills, the shadow skills. After looking at all his skills, Quinn decided to focus on the shadow skills. There were currently still 4 shadow skills grayed out in the system that required him to use skill points to unlock. The only way Quinn knew to get skill points was to upgrade the level of his current shadow skills. It worked the same way as his blood skills. The more he used them, eventually it would level up. This was the best option for Quinn while in the game. The next day had arrived, and as the group agreed, everyone was currently doing their own thing. Everyone was kind of pleased that they had decided to do this. At first, Quinn was a little bit worried about Peter. But when he asked what Peter was planning to do, Peter was already heading off to Logan's room with a bunch of sandwiches held in his arms. It seemed like the two were getting on well enough that Quinn no longer needed to use his blood. While heading to the game room, he noticed Fex too had decided to come along. There wasn't much for him to do in the game after all. When Quinn entered the game, he decided to watch a couple of Fex's matches. It came to him as a surprise that Fex seemed to be playing online rather than using the private server, because just like Quinn, they were both unable to use their abilities inside the game. After watching a couple of games, he could see that Fex was able to beat his opponents without using his blood skills or string abilities. He purely used his body and martial arts to overpower his opponents. During the second match, Fex had meant something quite skillfully, and for the second time, Quinn had seen him use an improvement of the martial arts that were taught to him. The first time was during the match against Leo. Seeing this just reminded Quinn again that he needed to get stronger. Quinn backed out of the game and joined the private server, where he was able to use his shadow abilities freely. Shadow Void. The first thing Quinn activated was Shadow Void. Soon, the room, instead of white, was now covered in purple, shifting shadows above. Quinn planned to level up his level 1 shadow skills first. Since they were lower levels, they would require lesser usage to level up. Currently, the shadow skills were level 1. Shadow Control and Shadow Void. For each level up of skill, Quinn gained 10 stat points. Right now, he was aiming for the skill in his system that cost the most amount of skill points. The skill is known as Shadow Eater, costs a total of 50 points. He repeated the process of activating the skills as many times as he could, and due to it being in the game and the lobby, he didn't run out of MC points. Eventually, Shadow Void leveled up to level 2. Quinn could now decide the size of the Shadow Void, and depending on which, it would either cost far more or far fewer points. The other skills that leveled up were his Shadow Cloak, which was now level 3, along with his Shadow Equip, which was level 3 as well. The time used to cast these skills was incredibly fast, and it seemed like the Cloak skill now used more shadows to hide him, making it even harder for him to be seen by those with good perception. Unfortunately, the only skill that hadn't leveled up for him was his Shadow Control skill, the most useful and powerful skill in his arsenal. The skill allowed him to combine it with his Blood Swipe, as well as block incoming attacks. But it seemed like the skill could only be used on an opponent, hence it was void in the game. There was some good news, though. When leveling up the skill from level 2 to level 3, the number of skill points given to him increased. Instead of 10 per level up, he was given 15, giving him a total of 30 skill points. But it still wasn't enough for him to unlock the skill Shadow Eater. The day had come to an end, and Quinn would have to be satisfied with improving his current shadow skills and learning the Phantom Punch for now. Finally, the day had arrived. It was the weekend, and all the first-year students were told to gather inside the portal room once again. It was time to go through the orange portal. Presently, the first-year students were biding their time inside the canteen. Every one of them was seated in their groups within their classes. Meanwhile, their respective homeroom teachers were standing at the end of the long table. On this expedition, each teacher would be traveling with a group of 50 students. 2 of the generals, Faye and Leo, would be taking charge of the expedition. Only, they would be moving slightly ahead of the whole group. Soon the classes were called one by one into the portal room. Finally, Dell's class was called, so all of the students belonging to that group began to prepare their things ahead of going through the portal. Standing at the front was Dell. The portal glowing with orange light illuminated his figure. although this time Dell looked different compared to his usual self. Usually when teaching a class, he would be wearing the standard uniform that the teachers wore. This time the uniform could hardly be seen beneath the beast gear clothing that he donned. The thing was, the armor he was wearing didn't look like a beast gear at all. It rather looked more like a mage outfit. From head to toe, it looked like he was dressed in robes, but if inspected closer, certain accessories could be seen around his wrists and legs. Furthermore, instead of a weapon, a shield was mounted on his back. Before giving his speech to the students, he decided to survey the whole group. He could feel the sweat dripping from his forehead, thinking, "I can't believe that the school is doing this. Why do homeroom teachers have to go along with them? These kids don't even know what could be on the other end. If they did, they would be just as nervous as me." All these fearful thoughts were running through Dell's head. In the past, he had done an Orange Portal expedition. Because of that, he was aware that the results of the expedition could turn out for the worse. It was like flipping a coin. In some places, it would be a walk in the park, while other times it would feel like they had been sent to hell. In the fear of being sent inside the portal once more, he elected to become a teacher, but it seemed as if fate was toying with him. "All the groups present, please raise their orange scanning devices," Dell said, his voice loudly resounding within the hall. As Dell asked, the representative of each group showed themselves. For Quinn's group, it was Peter. Once again, he was in charge of carrying the group's supplies, and this included the scanner. The only difference this time was that Peter had volunteered to help his master. It also made sense, since Peter was fairly sturdy and had a lot of strength. There were advantages such as his unlimited stamina, so he wouldn't get exhausted that easily by carrying heavy objects. "I will now explain and show you how the scanner works. I will only explain once, so listen up," Dell said, as he raised the scanner for everyone to see. "The scanner is fairly simple to use. You will only need to point it at an object. You can see that on the screen you can select the area or item that you want to scan. Once you confirm, the scanner will do the rest for you. Simple, right? So remember, don't mess it up," Dell said in a slightly annoyed voice. A student raised his hand, but Dell decided to completely ignore him as he continued with his explanation. "The scanner can be used to scan almost anything: buildings, beasts, plants, water, and so on. It will try its best to break down the information it has received and display it on the screen for you, although this is not the goal of the expedition." Dell halted his speech, heaving a sigh before resuming. His irritation was starting to get the best of him. "What you students need to do is look for things on the planet which have never been scanned before, and this includes beasts. In your teams, each newly scanned object will earn you points. If the item has been scanned before, you will receive no points. Now for the most crucial part. There is quite a range on these scanners. Before engaging in combat, it will scan every beast that is within your vision. The most useful thing about these scanners is that, even if they have never seen a beast before, it will be able to tell you what level the beast is at." After the explanation with the scanners was over, Dell went on to tell them how the expedition would work between the classes. Each class, together with their homeroom teacher, would be sent off to a certain area. When they reached their assigned space, the class would stay there for a while, allowing every one of the students to scan the area thoroughly. If they were to run into a beast with a tier higher than intermediate, they were advised to fall back and tell the teacher immediately. The homeroom teacher would then inform the generals, who would come to their aid as soon as possible. In total, there were 10 classes. Hence, Faye and Leo would stay in the center of these classes so they could respond to each of their calls of distress as quickly as they could. As soon as Dell's lecture was finished, the groups began making their final preparations. While Quinn was looking around, he noticed that Logan was already tinkering around with the scanner, no doubt making adjustments to the scanner's system. It wouldn't surprise Quinn if Logan was able to change the readings to allow his team to get the top score. All of a sudden, he felt a soft touch on his shoulder, interrupting his observations. "Hey, do you need one of these if we're going outside?" Feck said as he waved a strange object in front of Quinn. It looked like a flask made out of silver. The only difference was that, on the facade of the flask, a skull that had 2 sharp fangs on the upper jaw was displayed. It was a strange design for Quinn. Looking at it closely, Quinn realized that the design was utterly similar to the one that the book had, the one that had given him his powers. "What's that?" Quinn asked, without really thinking about what he had just said. He was unsure whether this was common knowledge among the vampires or not. "This is a special flask that allows us to hold the blood inside. If you used a normal flask, the blood would spoil in a few days. However, this one is especially used within the circle of vampires to keep blood fresh. Well, that is, as long as it remained inside the flask. By the way, every vampire is given one," Fex explained. "If you're going to another planet with beasts as its main population, then it's best to bring one of these with you. We'll be gone for a week, and I don't want to be turning into a bloodsucker." After hearing those words, a specific memory came flooding back to Quinn's mind. It was related to the time when he did turn into a bloodsucker. Fex seemed to not rely on blood as much as Quinn. Perhaps it was because he was closer to the next evolution. But for Quinn, if he didn't receive blood within 2 days, he would turn into a bloodsucker. Thankfully, though, Quinn now had the blood bank. That, in a way, acted the same way as the flask. Still, even last time, Quinn had used up his blood bank in a fight, and eventually was starving for blood. On this occasion, there were others to rely on. Though it was unlikely that their group would be split again, there was always the chance. But if vampires were required to carry around such a flask, was the blood bank also a unique skill amongst the system, one that other vampires didn't have? It had saved him so many times in the past. If Quinn could, he would have tried leveling up as fast as he could, but after many battles, it still hadn't been done. "So, do you have a spare one of these?" Quinn asked as he eyed the flask. "Of course, that's why I came over. If you didn't have the basic ring, I didn't think you would have the flask either." Fex then pulled out a similarly styled flask from the inside of his shirt and handed it straight over to Quinn. After spending some time with Fex, Quinn really couldn't say that he was a bad guy. He did grow on him with time. "Maybe during this trip I can finally ask about his shadow powers," Fex thought. Yet for some reason, while contemplating the matter, he felt guilty. He didn't know why it was the case. Finally, Del had begun to call each group into the portal. As usual, each member had to hold on to each other's shoulders as they passed through the portal. Quinn's group was called up, and Vorden took the role of being in front. "I'll go behind the pretty boy," Sia insisted as she grabbed onto Vorden's shoulders. Behind her was Layla, and then Quinn, Fex, and Peter at the back. The group took a step forward as they prepared for what was to come in their orange portal expedition. While going through the portal, the group made sure to hold on to the person in front of them tightly. Last time it wouldn't have been so much of a big deal if they were to disconnect and let go. Although this might have caused them to split up, they were guaranteed to teleport somewhere safe in the shelter, but this time was different. Shelters were often incomplete, and sometimes not all of the spawn areas had been marked yet, so they could be chucked deep into beast territory and be there on their own. The fear could be felt in Sia's shoulders as Layla gripped on tightly, while Sia slid down her hands towards a certain place on Vorden's body. If they weren't in the middle of being warped, he would have turned around and pushed her, but Vorden wasn't that cruel, and Rayton wasn't complaining about what was happening one bit. Finally, the distorted space ended, and white light could be seen up ahead. When the white light vanished, a bright blinding light flashed in their eyes. Finally, when their eyesight slowly returned, the first thing they could see was green. Lots of green. More specifically, giant green trees. "Please step aside to allow the other students to arrive," a loud voice said as he pointed to his side. Just like last time, they had arrived in one of the areas that had been circled off. When they looked at the person commanding them, he hardly looked any older than them. Most likely a recruit who had just graduated and decided to stay with the army. The group went over to where the man pointed, and it seemed there were other groups of students standing by the side, waiting as well. Several soldiers were checking and coordinating with them, making sure they stayed in place and didn't wander off. "It's a lot better organized than our last trip," Layla said. "Of course it would be," Sia replied. "A green portal planet is practically safe. You would have to be a moron to be killed on one of those. But here, an orange planet can be a huge risk, so they have to be extra careful." Sia's words rubbed the group in the wrong way. They had been involved in the Dalki attack, which was devastating to them. They still had a deep scar in their minds. Although the students knew of what happened, they weren't informed which group of students had encountered the Dalki. Many of them thought it was only Ben's group that met them, and while standing off to the side, Quinn was able to take a good look at the shelter they were in. The planet and the shelter itself were vastly different from the one before. The first thing Quinn did was pop up his trusty umbrella to protect him from the sun, but this time it didn't do much to make him feel better. Looking around, everything looked green. Giant trees, bushes, vines, and even plants that Quinn had never seen before. They were now in what Quinn would call a forest. This was why Quinn's body still felt extremely sluggish. The place was humid, hot, and sticky, and it looked like he wasn't the only one being affected, as everyone around was sweating heavily as well. But Peter seemed fine. At this point, he started thinking Peter might have gotten a better class than himself, but then he remembered Peter digging into human flesh, and he was fine with dining on blood for now. The shelter itself was vastly different as well. In a way, it looked incomplete. Most of it seemed to be made from some type of wood and mud, although the architecture was impressive. They had managed to build upon the large trees, incorporating them into their shelter. There were stiff, large bridges made from wood and spiraling staircases that would lead you from floor to floor and tree to tree. The ground floor, where they were standing at the moment, was mostly empty and only had certain areas that had been marked out, where the teleportation spots would take you. Upon looking upward, Quinn could see residential houses and some market shops, although nowhere near the amount compared before. But the thing that surprised him the most was just how many residential houses there were in an orange portal like this one. Quinn even saw children playing on the bridges above. Layla could see the surprised look on Quinn's face. "This is one of the cheapest places for people to live in," Layla explained. "This is a 5-tier city, so it doesn't have any walls to protect the citizens. Hence, they are open to attack. The soldiers will do their best to protect them, but because this planet is still in the middle of exploration, their focus isn't so much on the shelters. The citizens aren't required to pay tax on an orange planet, so those who can't live on Earth and can't even make a living on a green portal planet end up here. Of course, red portal planets are just too dangerous in the first place, and only the strongest of military shelters and factions can survive there." Quinn started having strange thoughts after hearing this from Layla. If it was true, those who couldn't afford a place to live on Earth had no choice but to be here, then why didn't Quinn end up in one of these places like these kids? When his parents had died, a government official had come over and explained to him that they would look after him until he was 16 and provide him with an apartment. So why didn't these kids get the same type of treatment? Now that he thought about it further, it was also strange when he had received the book that gave him his vampire abilities at age 10. They were so keen on trying to keep things for themselves, so why did they allow Quinn to have the book? At first he thought it was because the book was useless, but now he was having second thoughts about the whole thing. Thinking back, he didn't know his parents all that well, and they didn't leave much behind other than the book. How did they even get the book in the first place? "System, do you know how my parents obtained the book?" Quinn asked. "I'm afraid I am not able to answer that question for you at this time, but in the future, if the right moment occurs, I will be able to answer you." It seemed like there was a link between Quinn's parents and the book after all. However, the system wasn't willing to share this information with him, not until he unlocked a certain condition, as explained before. While Quinn was deep in thought, he noticed that a group of travelers had arrived at the shelter. One of the higher-ups in the military went forward to greet them, and they both seemed to respect each other well. After a brief chat, the traveler handed the man something before heading off, back into a part of the forest where they had come from. "They look strong," Fex said with a grin on his face. "That's because they are," Borden replied. "To be able to travel through a planet alone where the level of beasts is unknown with just 5 of them, they have to be confident in their skills." "What were they doing at the military shelter?" Quinn asked. "Most likely sharing information," Borden replied. "You see, on an orange portal planet, there is more than one shelter. Different factions, including the military, usually set up a base here. Exploring a planet is a collective effort, and once they finish scanning their parts, every shelter share information with each other. This saves time so the different shelters aren't exploring parts of the planet that have been explored already." The students were now being led along to an open space, and while doing so, they could see the people from the shelter and children come out from above. They looked down on the new students, peeking over from the bridge. All of the first-year students were once again lined up in rows with the homeroom teachers at the front, while Faye and Leo stood in the middle of all the classes. They had come to an open area of the man-made forest. The trees had been rooted and dug out, and the ground flattened. Most of what they were standing on was mud. They could also see several paths from the circle, open area leading deeper into the forest. "All right, everyone, each class shall now explore a different path," Faye said. "I hope you listen to your homeroom teachers well. The scanners will not activate until your teachers say so don't try to get ahead of yourselves. You will continue to follow the path, and your teachers will tell you when you are in an unexplored area. Remember to always stay on your guard and have your scanners by your side. My last warning to you all, you will encounter beasts on this trip. At what level I do not know. I wish you all luck," Faye shouted. The students saluted the two sergeants before heading down their paths. "I wonder what beasts we will run into," Quinn thought, excitedly thinking about the experience points. The homeroom teacher Dell took the lead down one of the paths. The pathway they walked on seemed quite wide and well flattened. It was clear the path was man-made, and it looked like large vehicles would come through this way from time to time. Because the path was originally meant for large vehicles, the students weren't bunched up in a single file, but were able to spread out and take in the scenery around them. Fex, who was walking by Quinn's side, took in a deep breath of fresh air. "Now this is what I call different." He had a huge grin on his face as he looked around the large greenery surrounding them. While the two of them were walking, Quinn took this as his chance to ask him a few questions. Fex had already made up his mind that Quinn had always been on Earth, a vampire who hadn't been back home, so he thought it was only natural to show some interest. "So, back home, there isn't anything like this?" Quinn asked, adding the word home, trying to make it sound natural. "Nah. Compared to Earth and these planets with all the bright colors, our home has nothing," Fex moaned. While relocating, they had decided to choose a mostly dark place, and they also needed an atmosphere that they could still live in. They had found the perfect place for vampires, but I don't know why, but it always felt strange to me. The words that Fex spoke confirmed a few things to Quinn. The vampires were indeed no longer on Earth like they were when the blonde man was a vampire. At some point they had relocated to a different planet. Now, Quinn was even more confused about how his parents had managed to get the book. "Don't worry, if you and I ever return to the place, I'll give you a grand tour," Fex replied. "So Quinn, you asked me a question, now let me ask you one. Where do you get your shadow ability?" Hearing these words, Quinn thought back to how the system had mentioned not to tell anyone about the shadow ability because it was something important to the vampires. "Just tell them you don't have permission to tell. That shall be enough for now," the system said. "I'm afraid I don't have permission from my leader to tell you that," Quinn answered. Fex clicked his tongue and placed his hands behind his head. "Figured as much, but the shadow ability is cool." As they continued to walk down the path, they noticed there were plenty of plants that looked strange. At the very least, they didn't resemble anything back on Earth. One plant was shaped like an S and was the same size as the human body. There were several light blue ring-like patterns on it. Upon seeing this, the other students pulled out their scanners trying to gather information. But just like Faye had said, the scanners currently weren't working. They seemed to all be linked to a device that the homeroom teacher had. Only when he activated his device would the other students be able to use their scanners. Although others couldn't get any information from it, someone else could. Quinn walked up to the plant to see if he could. There was one skill that he had that might work. Inspection, blue ringed growth plant, a plant that can be used to greatly enhance the... "Hey, Quinn, what's up with your face, man?" Vorden asked, looking at Quinn, who seemed flustered for some reason. "Is it the heat? If you need a break, we can start walking at the back of the group." "No, don't worry, I'm fine," Quinn replied as he quickly moved on. As they walked, Quinn decided to use his inspection skill on every new thing he saw. It was a great chance for him to level it up once again. There were still times when the inspection skill was unable to give him information, but while on the red portal planet, it was a lifesaver. It even allowed him to get the shadow ability that was locked away in the storage unit. Quinn had tried repeatedly using the inspection skill on a basic item such as a pen, but after about 1,000 tries and no result, it seemed that the inspection skill needed to be used on new items to be able to level up once more. The pathway came to an end, and now the mud had turned into thick, heavy leaves and short green plants. Students' pace had slowed down. Now, with every step they took, they had to be careful when putting their foot down. Several roots were hidden underneath the leaves, and once in a while, a student would be caught in place. "A beast!" a student cried. "A beast has me wrapped around the leg!" The student's teammates who were nearby quickly jumped back and drew their weapons. But after a while, the student calmed down and looked up at his friends. He was too embarrassed to say what had occurred. "Sorry, false alarm, it was just a tree root," the student said, chuckling away nervously. One of the students in his group slapped him on the back of the head, and they moved forward. "This should be a good spot," Dell said as he placed his large shield onto the floor. They were now in an open area. There weren't as many trees and vines. It allowed them to see from all directions. "Students are not to travel more than 200 meters from this spot. If you do, your scanner will notify you, indicating they will no longer work," Dell explained. "For each new plant discovered, you will receive 5 points. For each new beast discovery, 20 points. Please remember this is not a hunting trial. There's no need for you to kill beasts. However, anything intermediate level and below, you may try your best to go against them if you wish, but any kills will not be awarded points. Still, you can keep the crystal for future use as well. All right, your scanners are on." At the same time, each of the scanners made a ding sound, and the students rushed off in different directions, all apart from Quinn's group. "Heh, what are you doing?" Sia complained. "Let's go, don't you want a good grade?" Before, it was always Erin, trying to get good grades, but without her, it felt different. "Let's do this," Layla said. "Let's get to the top for Erin." Quinn liked that idea. He rushed off into a section of his own along with Peter and the rest. They had split up a bit, and when they found something interesting, they would shout out to Peter to come over and scan the item. "Over here!" Layla shouted, as she spotted an odd plant that resembled an octopus. Peter rushed over. Even with his bag, his speed was great. He could see the plant using the scanner, and now all he needed to do was press the red button on the scanner to start the process. Suddenly, he felt something crash into his side, pushing him down to the ground. "Pfft, too slow," the student said. "That was on purpose," Layla complained, seeing that Peter was barged over. The student then quickly took out his scanner and pressed the red button. After waiting a few moments, a ding sound was heard. If the plant hadn't been scanned before, and their team was successful in obtaining points, there would be a ding, which sounds similar to cash being withdrawn. If the item had already been scanned, a big red X would appear on the scanner, with an error sound instead. This meant that the plant the student had just scanned was a new discovery, and they had obtained 5 points. As Peter slowly got up from the ground, he walked over to the student. The boy carefully started to analyze just who was walking towards him. The first thing he did was look at the person's watch, noticing that he was a level 3 user. The one that had barged into Peter was also a level 3 ability user, but slightly higher, going into the 3.4 range, meaning he not only had the power of a level 3 ability, but the skills to go with it. Still, the levels felt too close. If the two were to fight, and Peter's ability was an offensive ability, there was no telling who would win or not. Because of the fierce look in Peter's eye, he immediately backed out. That was until 4 more students had arrived and were now standing by his side. There was 1 girl in the group along with the original student, and 3 boys. "Come on, Pio, let's just ignore these guys. We're just wasting our time with this, and we can always go and get more points," Layla said, quite loudly so the others could hear. "You, the pretty girl, stay." The boy who had given the command was pointing at Layla. On his wrist displayed the number 5.2. Seeing this, Layla knew straight away why the boy was arrogant. Layla decided to ignore this and started to walk off while pulling Peter by his sleeve. "I said stay!" the boy shouted. The distance between the two parties was around 15 meters, but the boy seemed to have closed the distance at an instant speed and had already made a fist aiming towards Layla. But Peter was not a slowpoke himself and noticed the punch, managing to lift his arm, blocking the attack in the dead center of his forearm, between the wrist and elbow. The boy could feel the impact and even heard the crack sound it made. Although the blow wasn't strong enough to snap the bone and pierce the skin, he knew he had fractured Peter's arm. Peter didn't feel any pain, and nor did he cry. The boy hesitated for a moment, but then he saw Peter's hand reaching out to him. He ran to where he was before. Looking at Peter's arm, Layla could see it was starting to swell, but soon it would heal, so she wasn't worried about him. She was more worried about what he would do. It had been a while now, and the others had already noticed the changes in Peter's behavior, so in the end, Quinn decided to tell them the truth. That this was due to his involvement that brought Peter's aggressive nature. As the boy was about to say some clever remark, Quinn and the others had arrived, including both Vorden and Sia. The first thing Quinn had noticed was also Peter's arm. "Peter, who did this to you?" Quinn asked in annoyance. Just from the direction Peter was looking, Quinn could tell which one it was. Peter wouldn't stop staring at him. "Do you think you can just hurt our teammate in the middle of an assessment?" Quinn asked. "Quinn, you know you can't fight using your full strength. Let's just leave it be," Layla said. Sia, watching the whole thing, thought Quinn was crazy. Was he trying to have a go at the other team? Of course, it made sense that one would be angry if they were to injure a teammate, but Quinn was a level 1. What could he do? Most of the time, low levels were completely afraid of anyone above them. "I guess he will earn his place," Sia thought to herself.
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.